Hello and welcome back. This is our third video in our video series for Chapter 1, Biodiversity. Once again, I'm Miss Delia, and if you're ready, let's continue. If you remember, 1.3 is an experiment, which is why, although this is the third video, we're going to go straight ahead into 1.4, Domain Eukarya, Kingdom Protista. In some older books, they may also write Kingdom Protoctista. Okay, but we're just going to stick with one spelling now. And in this lesson, here are the learning outcomes. I hope that by the end of this lesson, you would be able to state the unique characteristics of Protista, state the classification of Protista based on its unique features, which is the two major phyla of algae and the four major phyla of protozoa. And last but not least, explain the importance of Protista. Okay, so if you're ready, let's get started. We'll first talk about what are protists. If you remember, this is a classification under the 5 kingdom system. So this is Kingdom Protista if we go by the level of organism and level of cell organization. Protists are what we consider eukaryotic and unicellular organisms. But over the years, although we take say Protista is only unicellular, as we research more, we find that some Protista are also multicellular. So here we write all Protista is eukaryotic, most unicellular, some multicellular. Some, or if not most of them, are motile. That means they can move around from place to place. Some of them are autotrophs, some of them are heterotrophs, or some of them are mixotrophs. So it's a mix of auto and heterotrophs. Okay, so they combine some photosynthesis and some heterotrophic nutrition. And even their reproduction, some they can reproduce asexually, they also can produce sexually. Okay, when it comes to the classification of Protista, we can generally split them into two main groups. The first one is the group that looks more like plants, and the second group is one that is more like animals. Can you have a guess which one is the one more like plants? It should be pretty obvious from the name that the group Algae is the one that is more like plants, and under this group we can split them into two phyla. So we have phylum Chlorophyta, which is usually represented by Chlamydomonas species, and we also have phylum Phaeophyta, which is usually represented by Fuchsius species. And then under group Protozoa, we can split them into four major phyla based on their modes of locomotion, which is we look at how they move and then we group them into one of these four groups. Now, if you're reading other sources, say for example, you're going on Wikipedia or you're looking at the Campbell textbook, you may find that there are more groups or more phyla than what we show you here. And that is not wrong, okay? Kalau kamu tengok ada buku, dia ada macam tambah group ataupun tambah phylum, itu tidak salah. Cuma, ini adalah phylum dan group yang kami mau tekankan pada tahap kamu. Okay, this is what we want to focus on at your level. If you want to learn more than that, that's fine. Completely up to you. Just that at this level, we're teaching you only these basic stuff so your head doesn't explode. Okay, so the four major phyla are Euglenophyta, Rhizopoda, Celiophora, and Epicomplexa. All right, so that is the classification. Let us look at the unique characteristics for each of these groups. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the algae first, all right? So this is things that are small and they're kind of like plants. A lot of them are unicellular, such as Chlamydomonas species, which we have right here. And some of them are multicellular, just like that brown seaweed over there that is called Fuchsius species. Now these algae are plant-like and they undergo photosynthesis. Their photosynthesis is because they have the presence of chlorophyll A and other accessory pigments. Kamu sudah tahu yang dalam chloroplast ada chlorophyll. Lepas ini kamu akan belajar lagi bahwa chlorophyll ini dia ada banyak jenis lagi chlorophyll. Dia ada chlorophyll A, B, C, phaeophytin, and banyak lagi lah. So a lot of these algae, if not all of them, have chlorophyll A and a few other accessory pigments. Although we say they are plant-like, they have no roots, stems, or leaves. Dia boleh photosynthesis, tapi dia tiada daun, dia tiada batang, dia tiada akar. They will store food in the form of starch, and most of them are found in aquatic environments. So think of oceans, think of lakes, ponds, or any other moist habitats with low light intensity. Okay? So, asalkan dia tidak kering, asalkan dia boleh buat photosynthesis, di sana kita boleh jumpa dia. That's pretty much all you need to remember about the unique characteristics of algae. This is just extra information. Ini adalah maklumat extra sajalah sebab pada syllabus lama, kami minta kamu untuk hafal pasal specific organism. Okay, but in the current syllabus you don't have to memorize, but I want to tell you about these organisms anyway. So I want to tell you a little bit about this algae called Chlamydomonas. This is a chlorophyte. It has 2 flagella, as you can see from the diagram over here, yang nampak macam sesungut. Itu adalah 2 flagella yang digunakan untuk bergerak. It has a cup-shaped chloroplast. So the dark green thing that looks like a U is the chloroplast of Chlamydomonas. Okay, and you will see that it has a red pigmented eye spot as a photoreceptor. What does this mean? Yang benda yang nampak warna merah-oren di sini, ini actually photoreceptor. Dia macam mata. Dia tidak nampak dengan jelas macam mata kita nampak gambar dengan jelas. Tapi dia boleh kesan di mana ada cahaya yang terik, di mana lebih gelap sedikit, lebih malap sedikit. So then that Chlamydomonas can decide whether it wants to go into the brighter area or further away from the light so that it doesn't dry out. Okay, another organism that I want to tell you about that is also extra information is Fuchsius species. So this is a type of brown algae or Phaeophyta. Okay, once again, the name is called Fuchsius, not Ficus species. Fuchsius species in the what looks like leaves, it contains chlorophyll A and C, carotenoids, and fucosantine. Okay, these different types of chlorophylls is what makes it look brown. After it does the photosynthesis, when it stores the food, it stores it in the form of laminarin. Okay, not entirely sure why it doesn't use starch, but what we know is after researching, they store the carbohydrates in the form of laminarin. Okay, so you see here this on this diagram, this is Fuchsius species, also called rockweed, and there are also other types of seaweeds that are kind of similar looking as well. Okay, so it's very interesting to look at their shape and how they can hang on to the bottom on a certain substrate. We'll talk a little bit about the structure of the Fuchsius. So this is the body or the thallus of the Fuchsius. So you see what looks like leaves, apa yang nampak macam daun ito bukan daun. Those are called the blades, okay? And they are associated with air bladders for buoyancy. So kamu nampak ada yang macam bubble-bubble pada benda yang nampak macam daun tapi bukan daun. Bubble-bubble itu digelar air bladder. Okay, itu untuk membantu supaya seaweed ini bila dia dalam air, dia dapat menegak. Okay, because it has the bubble, it will stay upright for buoyancy. It has these things that look like stem, yang nampak macam stem tapi bukan stem, digelar sebagai stipes. Dan bahagian yang melekat kepada tanah, melekat kepada batu dan sebagainya, itu tidak dipanggil akar. We don't call that a root. We call it a holdfast. So this is the anatomy of a Fuchsius plant, okay? Fuchsius species organism. That is what looks like leaf. What is what look like stem. That is what looks like root. Tapi nama dia actually berbeza. Remember, algae don't have leaf, stem, or roots, although they look like it. We can compare between the chlorophyta and the Phaeophyta if we want. This is not exactly in your syllabus, but you're free to do this on your own. Have fun, have a go. Alright, so that's all I need to tell you about algae. I'm now going to move on to the next group in Protista, which is group Protozoa. Let's start by talking about the unique characteristics of protozoa. We're going to start with the most obvious is that they are animal-like protists. They are unicellular and they are usually motile. When they are motile, they can move around in many different ways. And for example, Euglena, they can move using their flagella, amoeba can move using their pseudopodia, and paramecium can move using their cilia. Most of them are free-living, but some of them are parasites, such as Plasmodium. For the free-living ones, you can find them in many habitats, such as oceans and freshwater or soil, and the parasitic ones, you can find them in other organisms, but also sometimes in environments as well. Their reproduction, they can reproduce asexually and also sexually, depending on the environments. And this is a layout of the 4 major phyla of protozoa based on their modes of locomotion. You can go ahead and look up some videos on how they move. It's really fun to watch. The first one is phylum Rhizopoda, which moves using pseudopodium. A very common example of this phylum is amoeba. So you imagine how the amoeba moves, and that's it. The next phylum is phylum Celiophora. So organisms in this phylum would move using fine cilia on the outside of their bodies. So kamu bayangkan cilia adalah macam bulu-bulu yang halus. Okay, kalau kamu tengok pada Paramecium species dalam gambar ni, di sekeliling dia ada banyak cilia yang halus-halus. Kamu boleh bayangkan dia macam kaki gonggong. Okay, like the feet on a millipede. That's how they'll move their cilia slowly. The third phylum is Euglenophyta. This one, our main example is Euglena species, which has a really long flagellum at one end of its body. So you can just imagine how they swim like sperm does by spinning around the flagella. That's how they move in Euglenophyta. Phylum Epicomplexa moves a little bit differently than the other three. It moves using its epicomplex. And it's a bit difficult for me to explain it this way, so go ahead and Google some videos, look it up on YouTube. How do Plasmodium species protozoa move in their environments? That would give you a better picture of how epicomplexa would move. Just to give you a better image of what we're talking about when we're talking about protozoa, here are several diagrams that show kind of the anatomy of each of these cells. So, kamu boleh tengok dalam setiap jenis protozoa ini untuk setiap phylum, macam mana susunan organelle dalam badan dia. Of course, we can compare when we have differences and similarities. So you can compare between these 4 phyla in protozoa. You don't have to. This is just extra information for me to share to you. But yeah, you can compare them with their body shape. You can compare them how they move, how many nucleus they could have, whether or not they have contractile vacuole. But a lot of this is already out of your syllabus, but I'm just sharing it to you for extra information, and you're free to learn more on your own time when you want to. Okay, so that is pretty much it talking about their classification. Now we're going to move on and talk about why we need to learn about protists and their importance to us. Let's talk about the first importance of Protista, which is their roles in the biosphere, including CO2 fixation. Just like bacteria, protists are smaller organisms and they can do a lot of things that us larger organisms cannot do, including taking carbon dioxide from the environment and fixing that. Half of carbon dioxide fixation is carried out not by rainforests, but by marine algae in the surface layers of oceans. I'm sure you've seen videos about this somewhere on the internet. But basically, the reason why we have a lot of these oxygen still is because we still have algae in the oceans recycling that carbon dioxide and turning that into oxygen. It's responsible for half of the oxygen that is released into the atmosphere through photosynthesis. They are also the producers of aquatic food chains, especially the algae that we find in Protista. They are the main producers and they start the food chain and make sure everybody in the ocean is well fed. Talking about food, another importance of Protista is as a food source to us. So what I find in the text is that they usually use the example of chlorella. Chlorella is a type of algae that is high in foliate as well as a number of vitamins, minerals, proteins, and amino acids, and it's good as a supplement, especially for those who need extra iodine, extra iron and stuff. Another example of how Protista can be imported as a food source is a seaweed. This one is something we're already familiar with. Numerous species of algae are already eaten as seaweed in many cuisines. Kalau kita cakap seaweed, may mga banyak jenis dan saya pun tidak akan pergi search satu-satu. But here is one local example that I can show you, which is Colerpa lentilifera. Okay, so this is what is commonly known as lato in Sabah and also in the Philippines and also in numerous other areas as well. They eat this too. Also called sea grapes. And those are the good stuff about Protista. Now we're going to talk about some less good stuff. So we know that they're gonna be doing the photosynthesis stuff, but sometimes too much is not good. So we talk about the third importance of Protista, which is in eutrophication or algal blooms. Algal blooms occur when water bodies, such as lakes or ponds, receive excess nutrients that simulate excessive plant growth. These nutrients can come from things like baja, okay? So fertilizers that we use in our farms, they can run off and go into water bodies. When this happens, there is too much plant growth, there is too much algal growth, and too much algae on the water surface will reduce the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water. Sebab dia tebal, oxygen tidak dapat masuk ke dalam air. Okay, dia tidak dapat masuk meresap ke dalam air. Not enough oxygen in the water will result in the death of aquatic organisms. Kurang oksigen dalam air, ikan-ikan, organism yang dalam air yang perlukan oksigen, mati. Okay, so algal bloom, although we say it's green, looks kind of nice, it's actually not very nice. Okay, so we also have this diagram here illustrating how humans can affect the ecosystem and cause things like algal blooms. So if we're more responsible and more sustainable in how we farm and get our food and stuff and manage our waste, we can have a more balanced and healthy ecosystem. But in a eutrophic ecosystem, we're not managing our waste properly. All these extra nutrients are going into the water and causing algal blooms. That's how we get this ugly side of the diagram. Okay, this is also another poster illustrating the factors influencing the growth of harmful algal blooms. So here we could see toxic algal bloom happening on this side of the ocean, and where it is people go. It's where people go for swimming and recreation. It's also where drinking water is taken from, and shorebird poo, agricultural runoff. Yeah, have a look, have a read. And algal blooms can look to this extent. So this is an old photo that has been circulating around the internet of a boy swimming in a lake or a pond or a river that is covered in lots and lots of algae. Speaking of algal bloom, there is another type of algal bloom that has a special name. It's called red tide. So this is different because it's not the green algae. It's caused by something called dinoflagellates. Okay, this is also when we have too many nutrients. Nutrients usually relate to explosive population growth. Sebab kalau ada nutrient dalam air tu, okay, dinoflagellate tu dia macam, sesuai niya, and then dia akan membiak dengan cepat. So the explosive population growth of the dinoflagellates will make the water look like this. There are many dinoflagellates in this water, and the toxins released have caused massive kill of fishes, and they can be lethal to other marine organisms. Kalau dia sikit-sikit saja, it's okay. Tapi bila dia banyak, toksin yang mereka hasilkan boleh menjejaskan keseluruhan ekosistem air itu. Okay, so this is how red the water looks like when you have a red tide happening. Okay, so this is what the dinoflagellates I talk about look under the microscope. Dinoflagellates are important producers. They're a type of phytoplankton. They can release toxin, and if consumed by shellfish, can paralyze the nervous system of the infected fish, and they can cause death to organisms who feed on the infected fish. Yeah, so it's a type of plankton. Too much, bad. Okay, and another thing that is too much bad is when we have protist parasites going into our bodies. So another importance of protista, importance number 5, is in human health. The example that we usually use is Plasmodium species, which is a protist that causes malaria. This protist Plasmodium species, it will infect organisms using two hosts. The first host that it will hitch onto is the female Anopheles species mosquito. Okay? Nyamuk yang berbentuk macam ni, this is Anopheles species mosquito. And the second host that it will infect is us, the humans. The Plasmodium species is a protozoan which lives in the bloodstream of humans. So kalau dia sampai kepada kita, dia akan tinggal dalam saluran darah kita. And that's how we get really, really sick. Okay, malaria is a leading cause of death in some parts of the world still. Okay, so this is showing how a bite from an infected mosquito can transmit malaria to us. Parasites travel to your liver. And then after that, from the liver, they hatch and go into your red blood cells. By the time it reaches your red blood cells, that's when you start developing the symptoms. And then when another mosquito bites you, it can transfer that malaria onto other humans as well. Yeah, so it's a cycle there. It's a very interesting cycle. Go ahead and read more about infectious diseases if that is your thing. Okay? Oh, and this is supposed to be importance number 6. The sixth importance of protista that we're going to talk about is in sewage treatments. So algae and protozoa are important organisms in wastewater treatment. So air-air kumbahan yang dikumpul di pusat kasih bersih air to, whatever it's called, water treatment plants. In the water, it's not just chemicals, it's also algae and protozoa, and they help to break down the things in the wastewater and make sure that the water is clean afterwards. Okay, so they can form a slime layer within the trickling filter systems. Okay, so in this particular example, we have several types of protozoa such as amoeba, ciliates, and flagellates that are present throughout the entire water sewage treatment process. Here you have more wastewater diagrams that show you how water goes here and there. And you can also go through these video links and have a read through them as well. Of course, if you're curious, go ahead and Google how protists play a part in water treatment plants. They can explain that stuff better than I can. Okay, so here are some video links. Go ahead and go for those if you want. And just a very quick summary of what we went through in this subtopic. In 1.4, we talked about protista, which is divided into two groups, algae and protozoa. We have chlorophyta, phaeophyta under algae, Celiophora, apicomplexa, and rhizopoda, and euglenophyta under protozoa. Remember to go and read through the unique characteristics of protists and also the importance of protists. Okay, that is pretty much it for this subtopic. What should you do now? You should come up with your own short notes for this subtopic. After that, try and complete tutorial question chapter 1, part B question 1. And here you should be able to see the question, Kingdom Protista generally consists of unicellular organisms that belong to domain Eukarya. It's very simple, 3 marks only. Go and have a try. That is all from me. I look forward to seeing you in the next video and in the next lesson. So thank you very much for your time and goodbye.